Hey there, how you doing? Anthony Taylor here. Today, I want to talk to you about managing team conflict and developing a team that gels and that's tight together. And this video is part of our Leaders Digest series on managing conflict, and it's a critical part for leaders and managers to understand so they can make their teams as successful as possible. So there's kind of like the two sides of it. There's the pain and pleasure part. Obviously, you want your team to gel, you want them to have fun, you want them to be engaged. You also want to manage conflict. Now, there's kind of positive conflict where you're able to use conflict to get to the heart of issues, to the heart of decisions. And then there's negative conflict when people can't work together, won't work together, and you get stuck at impasses. Or worse, I've seen that people don't deal with the conflict and try to kind of build their businesses around it. And it's just not workable. It takes a lot more time. It's so frustrating for everybody involved. And it happens a lot more than you think. People kind of accept certain things. They accept conflict because it's too hard to work through. And so the key part that I want to recommend today, and as part of this kind of pack, is to talk about how you can successfully manage conflict and move your team to the point of gelling. So I want to talk about conflict first, and then I'll talk about gelling after. So a lot of conflict, I find most conflict actually happens because of just differences in expectation or differences in understanding. So as a leader, in our last Leaders Digest, we talked about leadership and building a team. It was the importance of setting expectations, clear understanding. And so a lot of conflict happens when there's a difference between expectation and what actually happens. And so that expectation could be under communication. It could be, how we work together. It could be meeting accountability or delivering deadlines or what have you. A lot of conflict happens in teams when expectations aren't met on one side or the other. Unfortunately, as human beings, we show up with a whole bunch of expectations. So how do you manage that? Number one thing we do is, in part of every strategic planning session, is we do ground rules so that we can create an environment that fosters healthy conflict. Conflict is a good thing when used well, but if you don't have the right boundary conditions, you don't have the right understanding, you don't have the shared understanding, then people see things differently. So what are the ground rules that you have within your teams, whether that's a team charter or values and behavior? Say, hey, this is how we work through conflict. This is how we view conflict. This is how we view disagreement. And this is the process that we have to work through it. So that's critical. Values and behaviors, you want to have it as part of the organizational DNA, as part of the team DNA. You want to ideally use it when hiring people to make sure that you're having the right people join the organization on the front end. If you have a group of people with one set of values, you add somebody else with an opposing set of values, you're going to have a bad time. So making sure that from a values and behavior perspective, you have that alignment with the group. Setting those ground rules, setting that shared understanding is critical as a system. And then just conflict. You have to work through it. What I recommend to people when talking about it, and I say, focus on the process instead of the person. People get so lost in the, I need to be right. I need to have this be my way. They forget about why they do it. And I'm guilty of it all the time. I get defensive about stuff. I don't want to be questioned, but if you notice even my language there, it's I don't want to be questioned, not the process of the work. When I can kind of separate myself from, hey, is it my work that did it, or are we focusing on the outcome that we're trying to create? When I can pull those two apart, I can actually see my shortcomings, I can see my understandings, and I can manage the conflict with my own internal team and myself. And for those of you that know me, I'm not always the easiest to get along with, but I really try to do my best. But everybody's got their shortcomings. And so as a leadership team, as a group, as you're moving towards that point of gelling, is that understanding the good and the bad and the ugly of everybody that you're working with, and to create a system and a structure that can support all of that being productive. If it's not moving things forward, it's pulling them back. So don't create an environment that has too many things that pull your organization back. Unfortunately, we don't like dealing with conflict. It's uncomfortable. It's, it could make us look bad. There's a high risk with conflict. And so most people will avoid it. The problem with avoiding conflict is that it doesn't allow your organization to take that next step. You have to build around it. It's often more costly. It's often more frustrating. And so as a leader, creating an environment for conflict, to productive conflict, to be able to move forward. And as an individual, addressing conflict with the people that it needs to be addressed to. Don't gossip, don't talk to other people that aren't involved in resolving said conflict. So now I want to talk about like team gelling. So conflict is, a natural part of team development that go through the forming, storming, norming. If you haven't seen that, Tuckman model is really helpful for team building. Anytime you add a new person, it's a new team. So you want to create rules, you want to create a system, you want to create a structure for that team to be successful. I'm rocking my, and I'll see if I can show it to you, Scoop Camp shirt from Little Man Ice Cream. So what they do once a year is they have a big retreat for all of their scoopers. They've got a couple hundred people who scoop ice cream. They put them in a room and to share the values, behaviors, understanding, expectation, like stories, so that everybody has that shared understanding. It's part of creating that gelling experience. Now, you might not have the ability to put everybody into a room, but you do need to do some things to support team development. Some people come to us and say, hey, we want to do a team building retreat and a team building activity. For us, we're really focused on the core of the strategic planning. So we don't do kind of team building activities, but strategic planning in itself is a team building activity because you're setting those norms, you're setting those expectations, you're setting that shared understanding that people can work from. Most people don't like the kind of like the soft stuff part of teams, but you need it to be able to work through those harder things. So conflict is a good thing. Team gelling is obviously the ideal thing. And then the third piece about getting your team to gel and manage all of that is change management. So changes that might happen outside of your organization, changes that happen inside your organization. Conflict arises when they don't agree with something that's happening. So what you need to do as a leader is to be able to develop a change management process within your organization so that there's a system and structure to resolve any resistance to said change. The people that work with us say, hey, we're here, we're trying to get to this like 3-year vision. And so there's going to be change. And you could take the perspective that change is bad. Change can also be good. And the context of how people see things ultimately determines if the change is bad and change is good. If there's negative conflict, it's because they see it as bad. If there's positive conflict, they see it as good. So how can you, as a leader, create a system to manage positive conflict? How can you create a system to support your team gelling and have that shared understanding of how we do things and a shared understanding of the team dynamics and expectation? And then how can you develop a process for change management? You do not need to create it again. We actually have got tons of blogs on change management and the kind of 3 main processes that we look at. But as long as you follow the steps of managing change, it'll help you be more successful in any endeavor, whether that's adding more processes and systems as you grow from like 100 to 300 million, whether that's you're onboarding new people that you've got through an acquisition. Maybe you're changing your core mission, and as function of that, you have to think of your company differently. All of those are change. All of those things can be managed, and a lot of it is through communication. So hopefully this video and everything else in our newsletter helps you manage change, helps you increase your team cohesion, and helps you get to the goals that you're wanting for your organization. I'd love to hear your perspectives on how you see change, how you see conflict, and what tips and tricks you recommend, because I think that's, as a community, we make all of ourselves better. If you haven't yet, be sure to subscribe to the newsletter, subscribe to us on YouTube, connect on LinkedIn, because we're always happy to kind of build the ecosystem and environment. And just appreciate you for watching. So once again, Anthony Taylor, I'm the CEO at SME Strategy. We facilitate strategic plan creations, and we partner with leadership teams to help them implement their plans through accountability, training, and coaching. So if you're looking for somebody to support you on driving those change management things forward, be sure to reach out for a conversation. All right, thanks for watching. I'll see you again.